Hi there, Forest River owners. Today in your 2015 Forest River Vengeance, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Lippert's Ground Control 3 6-point leveling system. This is going to be a hassle-free solution to get your camper level without having to do any work. So this way, when you get to your campsite, you don't have to get out your level, have somebody spot you, manually adjust each one individually, double check to make sure everything's okay. But with this, it's as easy as a press of a single button. You can see here on the right, it's indicating that we are out of level on the right and rear side. We'll go ahead and press the button now, and you'll watch as all of these lights on the outside go out and our center one goes green when we're completely level. Now, I will say this does take some time for it to adjust and get everything level, but the nice part about it is you can be unpacking your truck or doing other things while this is getting all set up automatically for you. Now, regardless of your terrain, the onboard sensors knows where level is, so it can adjust each jack individually to achieve perfect level. And with the 6-point setup, you're going to have more stability than your typical 4-point systems because you have more points of contact to the ground. This is going to feel better when walking around inside of your camper. With this system, you can also manually control it, so you can level it yourself if you want to. Or if you just need to get the jacks down so you can hook your truck up, you can lower the front as a pair. And if you're doing any kind of maintenance or things, you can also lower the back as a pair. We'll begin our installation by parking our trailer onto level ground, and then we'll want to level our trailer. So you can start by just sitting level on like the trim pieces and stuff, get it as level as you can there. But then to further ensure that you've got it as level as possible, you would want to measure from the ground to the bottom of the frame at the very back of the trailer, and then do the same at the front, and make sure you're measuring on the I-beam that's running front to back. They should be the same number roughly, front to back. If you're an eighth of an inch or so off, you're close enough at that point. But that way you can guarantee your trailer is about as level as you're going to be able to get it. It's important because we need to check our approach and our departure angle to make sure that when we install our jacks, that there's not going to be a point when our trailer is pivoting on our fulcrum here, which is our wheels, that if you hit some kind of bump or something and it lowers the front of your trailer down when it dips down, that the front jacks aren't going to drag. Or if you hit some other type of bump and it makes your trailer go up like this, we got to make sure that the back leg isn't going to contact the ground. We don't want them to rip off while we're driving. So they do have specific positions in the instructions where they would want them to be located. Your rear jack needs to be roughly 12 inches behind the rear tire, and our middle jack needs to be roughly 12 inches in front of the rear tire. So I went ahead and I just did a measurement from the back over, and what I actually usually do to help be a little bit more consistent in the measurements is I'll see where the edge of the tire is in relation to the leaf spring hanger, and that way I'll measure from the leaf spring hanger. If I know, okay, it's about 2 inches to the edge of the tire from the leaf spring hanger, I'll add 2 inches and measure from that hanger, because I know on the other side when I go do my measurement, if I'm going from the hanger, they're going to be directly across from one another. So that's a good point just to make sure you have consistent measurements. So we've already done our measurements at 12 inches, and you can see here on this particular trailer, we're going to have some challenges here, because 12 inches back behind this tire, we've got a set of stairs. This set of stairs is not going to allow us to install our jack. It's going to obstruct its location where it needs to go. So to install this, we are going to be removing these stairs, and we're going to have to put a completely different style of stair on it in order for this to work. Our middle jack, we also have a similar issue because there's a slide out located there. The jack in that location is also not going to fit, but we do have shorter jacks that are available here at eTrailer, which will allow you to position your jacks a little bit further from your distance. Because since they're shorter, we can go further away from the tire and still have clearance on that approach or departure angle. With the shorter jacks, we've talked to Lippert, and they said you can go up to a maximum of 36 inches when using the shorter jacks for your approach angle. So we are going to be removing the steps here for our back one, and then we are going to be using different jacks there for the middle one. And since we're using a different jack on this side, even though we've got clearance over on the other side for the longer jack, we have to match those two side to side and put both shorter jacks on each side. So you will have to purchase 2 extra jacks to be able to install this. So after we measure back our 12 inches here, you would want to make your mark, and then you would measure using a piece of string or a tape measure or whatever. You'll place it at the bottom of the tire, and you'll have an assistant or something hold this at the back of your trailer at the bottom, and that is your departure angle here. And if you're doing it from the front tire to the front at the bottom of your trailer, that would be your approach angle. We don't want our jacks to ever cross this threshold. If they cross this threshold, they could potentially contact the ground under certain circumstances when the trailer is pivoting, and you could damage your jack. when you're doing this measurement as well, ideally you want your jacks, when they're installed, to be 7 inches from the ground. Now, you of course don't want to ever cross that departure angle because you could potentially damage something. So if you have to be a little bit higher than that to clear for your departure angle or your approach angle, that's fine. It's just that at 7 inches, you're gonna get the most travel out of your jack, so you're gonna get the most leveling possible. If your jack is higher off the ground than that, it's just gonna reduce how far it's going to be able to compensate for your leveling system. So we are gonna be putting our front jack up kind of close to get that 7-inch mark. We are gonna end up being a little bit higher on those middle jacks than our rear ones, but they will still function. It's just the middle ones aren't gonna have quite as much reach as our rear one here. So let's head over to the other side real quick. We're gonna get into removing our steps and showing you moving some stuff around and how to get these installed. But we went ahead and did the other side, so that way we can kind of show you that departure angle thing that we're talking about, so you can get a visual, because there's a lot more clearance over on the driver's side there. So here we're on the other side. We already installed this jack. I'm holding it here to the bottom of the tire. My assistant's holding it to the bottom of the trailer at the back there, at the bottom of the frame. And you can see we're not gonna cross the departure angle here. But if this jack was any further back, it potentially could cross that departure angle, and that's where you would have contact issues. You wanna do the same measurement from the front tire at the bottom here to the front of the trailer and just verify your middle jack is also not gonna cross that. So we're gonna give you some additional stuff to show you how to determine how far down this jack is gonna be. We'll measure from the bottom of the frame down, so that way you know how long the distance this is going to be for this jack. So we're on this side here. Our mark for 12 inches is right here. You do get a little bit of play forward and backward as long as you don't cross that departure angle. So we ended up putting the front lip of our bracket right at that 12-inch mark because there were some hoses and some things we needed to clear, so we had to go just a little bit that direction. There's a cross brace here. Minor movements like that are gonna be okay, again, as long as you don't cross that departure angle. Now the measurement here from the bottom of the frame to the bottom plate on our foot is gonna be about 16 3/4 inches. So when you measure from your distance of the tire out, measure down 16 3/4 inches, check your departure angle and make sure that's gonna clear. All right, so what we're gonna do first is get our steps out of the way. You're looking above the tire, behind the fender at the fasteners here that hold our steps in place. And this piece here, this brace is gonna stay, but the steps are gonna drop down. These are carriage bolts and they have nuts on them. There's 2 on this side and 2 on the other side. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and zip those off of there. You're gonna use a 9/16 in size in most cases, but they can vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. You may wanna keep some pressure. I'm using my other hand to just keep a little pressure on the bolt. Since it's a carriage bolt, it's a square slot that it fits in, and that'll prevent the bolt from spinning while we remove the nut. And you may have to do it by hand. It's kind of rusty, so some of these power tools, just for these tighter enclosed areas, just don't cut it. So we'll get that one off of there. I'm gonna leave the carriage bolt there, so that way some weight's still supported on it, and then I'm gonna remove this one. And as I'm removing these, I have my body positioned with the steps kind of just rested on my legs. That way, we are supporting it as well, so in case these fasteners fall out of there or something, it's not gonna drop down on you, it's just gonna kind of rest a little more weight on you, because we're gonna be pulling it kind of down that way anyway. All right, so now we're just gonna head over to the other side and remove the fasteners that are on the other side. All right, so we've got all the fasteners removed. I got my legs under it. You may or may not have to kind of just raise up just a little bit and push those fasteners in. And I'm raising it up with my legs. All right, all the fasteners are removed. I'm just gonna kind of jiggle it a little bit to break it free from the corrosion, drop it on down, and then we'll just slide it on out of there. All right, with our steps out of the way now, we can have plenty of room to install them. So when we measure back 12 inches from the tire, or what I did is it's about 2 inches from the front of the leaf spring to the edge of the tire here. I measured from here and we measured 14 inches over. We had to go this far to clear the bracket here for our steps. And that's why we installed the other side at that same measurement, because that way they'll match side to side. So now we'll take our bracket. I've already marked it there, but I always like to put a mark down the side of the frame. It just makes it easier visually to make sure that when we're installing it, it is lined up. You may or may not have some hoses there that you may have to move out of the way, maybe not. So there we are, lined up. I'm just gonna double check my measurement. And yeah, right there where we wanna be. So we'll line it up. I'm gonna draw a line down the side because that's where we wanna end up. So now that we've got it in the location where it's gonna fit, we need to mark our holes here. You're gonna have to drill a total of 6 holes into the frame to mount each of these brackets. We're gonna have 4 that go into the side of the frame and 2 that go in the bottom. So before we drill them, you always wanna double check and make sure we're not gonna drill into any components. So lift up on your paneling there, just kinda give a quick feel, make sure that when we drill through this, we know we're not gonna drill into anything. And I don't feel anything up in there. We've got some clearance, so we're good to go. So we can mark our holes. So go ahead and just push it up there. Now you do wanna push upward, so that way it's up against the bottom of the frame. Make sure you stay lined up with your mark. And then mark each of your holes. We're gonna drill each one out with a 5/16 drill bit. Be careful around these hoses. You don't want, your drill rubbing against them or anything. You could potentially damage them. So we're gonna do our top ones, and then I'll probably use maybe a cable tie or something, or a bungee cord or something just to hold those up out of the way. We are gonna probably secure them once we get the mount up there and stuff, but we wanna see where the best place to do that is. You may or may not need to move some of the original clamps in order to get the proper slack for everything. We're gonna take our bit and we're just gonna go right up in here and drill it out. Now, I usually like to start my hole first. Once I get it started, we're using just a little bit of silicone spray, or there are other cutting lubricants that can help cut a little bit easier as well. And then you probably wanna brace yourself and drill it on through. All right, now we're just gonna repeat that for the 3 remaining holes. So we got all 4 of them drilled out. You can get creative. We just use our tape measure to hold those out of the way. Because again, we'll figure out securing it once we get some stuff up here. These are the self-tapping bolts that come in our kit. We're gonna put one of those in each of these holes. I found that it's easier to go ahead and start your threads without your bracket up here. And then you can just pull them back out and we can lift our bracket up. So we're gonna grab a little bit more of the silicone. Found that if you put a little bit on there, it threads in a bit easier. Use a 9/16 socket, and then we're gonna run it on in. And just pull it right back out like that, and we're gonna repeat it for each of the holes to get the threads tapped. So now we're gonna go ahead and lift our bracket up into position. We've got each one tapped. Just rest it up there for just a moment. Then we'll take our bolts here. Now it's not necessary, but since these are just held on by self-tappers, to make myself feel a little better, we're gonna put some red Loctite on each one. It's not entirely necessary, but better to be safe than sorry. And then you just gotta lift it up, line your holes up, and thread them on in there. Now I don't usually thread them all the way down just yet, tight, because we have bottom bolts we gotta put in still, so I'll get them kind of close. And we'll just drop it right there, not super snug yet, and we'll repeat the same process for the 3 remaining holes. So now we're looking at the bottom side of the frame. This is underside from our bracket, so our bracket mounted to the outside. You'll see you got 4 holes here at the bottom. We'll need to take 2 holes and choose those, but they need to be on the same side of the frame. So you either want to put 2 bolts on the inside of the frame or 2 on the outside of the frame. I prefer to do the inside if I can. It just feels like it's a better secure mount that way. But if you have obstructions up here and you need to use the outside set, that's perfectly fine. So we're just gonna use our bracket here as a template now and drill these out. All right, so once we got both those holes drilled out, we're just gonna do the same thing as before. Since our bracket's already up there, we can just put the Loctite on it now and just run it straight up. We don't really need to make the threads. All right, and if you were struggling to get it to go in there, I was having some difficulty, so what I would do is after I saw the bolt stop spinning, I would back it out just a little bit and then go back forward, and you get a little bit of momentum. That helps it go a little bit further, and you'll eventually cut all the way through it. All right, and we did run the two bottom ones up pretty snug because we want it to be snug up against the bottom of the frame. And now we'll go back and just finish tightening these if we left them kind of a little bit loose. And we only had them just barely loose enough to where if we needed a little tiny bit of movement, we were able to get it. So now that we've got each one of them started, we'll go back and torque them to the specifications outlined in your instructions. All right, now that we've got this securely mounted to our trailer frame, we can install our jack. Now the jacks here, they are going to be side specific. The motor will face towards the rear of the vehicle, so make sure you get it on the appropriate side. It does have several mounting holes here, so that way you can make some adjustments up or down as necessary to get the best height. But we were installing ours with the bottom hole in the bottom here, and that gets us right at that 7 inches we talked about. Also, all the measurements we gave you before for the distance was assuming you were installing the jack with the bottom hole lining up with the bottom hole. But you do have more adjustment there as necessary. And just so for you guys at home, if you're curious, it looks like the distance from center to center on our holes is about 2¼ inch for all these lower ones. And then this guy up here looks like it's close to about 4½ inches for the upper ones there as far as the distances. And then here on our jack, each of these holes are going to be a 1 inch center to center difference. So this is the hardware you're going to get in your kit. You'll get a flange nut and a large bolt. These are going to be a different size than the self-tappers. Instead of 9/16, you're going to use a 3/4 for these. We're going to use a total of 6 of each of these to secure our jack. So just line it up, see where your holes match up, and then just pick the most appropriate holes for your setup. So we're going to go with the lower hole here. Go ahead and start our nut on it. Also, one of the things I didn't talk about was the foot pad. These don't come installed on it when you get them out of the box. You will have to pin it on there, but I just like to have it pinned on there. It's a little bit easier on my body when it's pressing against me. It's not poking nearly as hard. So we're gonna make sure we put them in the same holes here. Always do same. So if you do the furthest lower, make sure you do the furthest lower on the other side. Okay, and then we're gonna go in the highest ones that we can access. That one up there, since we can't access it on this side, we're not gonna use. So we're gonna go to the next highest hole. Pop that in there. And then of course we're gonna put one on the other side in the same location. Once you've got them all started, we ended up choosing the lower ones. There is another set here for the middle ones. You can pick either and it won't matter. I went ahead and used the lower just because on the other side I chose the lower there. So we want them all to match. And now we'll run them down with our 3/4 inch socket and wrench. And once you've got them all snug down, we can go back and torque them to the specifications outlined in our instructions. You may or may not need that wrench to hold the inside when tightening it. We're going to use the bolt here for the top ones just because the distance from the bracket, it's a little bit easier this way. But ideally, if you were to torque from the nut side, you get a little bit better torque. All right, you would install your other rear jack the exact same way as this one. Just make sure it's in the exact same spot on the other side of the trailer. That's why I like to use that spring hanger as my measurement, because I'll use the spring hanger on the other side and go the same distance back to make sure that they are the same. All right, so we went ahead and installed our middle jack as well. We did have to go further forward for clearance because of our slide out, but you can see that we don't cross below the approach angle, so it is fine even though it is further forward than it does indicate in the instructions. The instructions indicate 12 inches in front of or behind your tire here, and the middle one would be in front of. And in the event of a slide out or something that's there, you can go further forward, but you just need to understand that if you go further than 12 inches forward, that's where your approach angle could potentially become an issue. That's why they recommend that 12 inches for both of them, so that way you get proper clearance. Since we don't have any clearance issues, we're okay with moving this up. And we did install this from the hanger to the front edge there at about 29 inches to get our clearance. So of course, when we did the other side, we make sure that we did the same measurement for installing that one. All right, so we're now at the front of our trailer. Also in our kit here for the 6-point system, we got the rear, the middle jacks. We also got these front jacks that are gonna be replaced. Your front jacks from your factory are gonna have a single motor that operates them with a beam that goes across to the other side. And our new kit's gonna have completely independent left and right jacks with their own independent motors, so that way you can get side to side leveling as well. So the whole thing's gonna have to come out. So down here at the bottom, this is where our legs are supported. We do have jack stands that we placed underneath the frame of our trailer. So it is important that you have those on there. If you can't pull your pin, which we can't quite yet, probably need to put a little bit more pressure on our jack stands and maybe jack it up just a little bit. You might need a little clearance there because we will need to take this whole piece off here, and we want to make sure that our trailer is supported by the jack stands and not these anymore since we're taking them out. So we put just a little bit more underneath. We can now pull the pin. And we're gonna need to be able to do that. These two pieces do completely separate, so when we pull this piece kind of up, it should slide out of there. There is a chance that the length of this tube, we may need to lift the trailer up higher if it doesn't slide up high enough for it to come all the way out. But we're gonna try it right here and see where we're at, and if we need to lift the trailer up some, we can always do that. So now we're going to go ahead and we can go ahead and remove this piece down here since we're kind of done with it. So again, make sure that the trailer is fully supporting itself on its jack stands. And then we can go ahead and remove these two fasteners here. You're going to use a 3/8 socket to do so. You'll want to keep a little pressure on the bolt because it is a carriage bolt. So this side has a square hole and the head of the bolt's square so it doesn't turn. But if the bolt slides out just a little bit, it's round beyond that point, so it will spin. So that's why you just want to keep a little pressure on it. Take out our other one. And then we can separate our two components. We're going to get new ones of these, but just in case the customer wants them, we'll just thread the hardware back through it and just start the nuts so that way all the pieces stay together. All right, so we got that loose. Next, I guess we'll take out the rod, then we'll take out the carriage bolts, or cut the wires and then take out the carriage bolts. So the next thing we're gonna do here, if we go up our jack now in the compartment, you'll see this rod that goes across to each side. So we're gonna take out this bolt here so we can separate the two jacks from one another. This is the primary jack, so that's what's got the motor, and as the motor drives, it operates this jack and also sends this shaft across the other side, which will rotate to operate that jack. So we're gonna use a 7/16 socket and wrench to remove these components. And we're not going to be using this rod at all anymore because our new motors do have their own independent motors. This rod should also collapse, so you should be able to slide it in. And at some point we're going to head over to the other side to remove that one and of course do the same things over there. The only difference is we don't have any wires or anything over there because there's no motor over there. So that one's actually a little bit smaller than this one is. Now we are going to go ahead and cut our wiring here. Let's see. I think we're going to cut it just right here on this side. All right, we got those cut. I'm gonna bend just the exposed parts of the wires away from one another there, so that way they have less opportunity to touch one another. They shouldn't be live unless you're activating the switch, but still just best practice, keep them away from one another. So now the only thing that's holding this component in here at this point is the clamps that are located here. You'll see it's got a protrusion right here at the bottom, and there's one right here. And if you notice, they're just to the inside of these mounting points. You got one just below it and one just above the bottom one there. There's a protrusion just like this on the other side of our jack as well. And it's resting between the lips of these two components. So that way the weight's actually kind of being supported by these little protrusions here. and not just the clamp. The clamp here really just ensures that it stays in between those 2 points. So we can go ahead and remove these nuts from the end of this. These are also carriage bolts, so you can keep a little pressure on it so it doesn't spin. This will be a 9/16 in size. So now we got our short socket. This one will fit. If for whatever reason you still can't get one in there, you can always use a wrench to take that off. And don't forget to keep a little pressure on it just in case, so it doesn't spin. All right, and these are normally in here pretty tight, so we're probably gonna have to tap them out. What I always like to do whenever I'm driving a bolt out is I'll take the nut and I'll thread it back on there. That'll help protect the threads and keep you from mushrooming the bolt. We can get it knocked out that far, and a lot of times once you get it knocked out so far, the last little bits just becomes a lot easier to drive it out. This one actually came out pretty easy though, so we can actually just press it on out. You don't always get that lucky. Like this lower one here, I don't think we're gonna get that lucky on this one, so let me get a little something to drive it, or we don't really want to pry on this material. It's probably pretty soft, so we're gonna maybe have to use a punch or something to contact that. So we're just gonna use our screwdriver here and just a dead blow to tap it. There we go. And we can take the nut off of there. Because again, usually once you start it, look at that, it pushes out after that. Now, there's really nothing holding this in here at this point. The only thing that's holding it kind of in place is just that it's been clamped in here for a long time. So let's just see if we can't lift it out of there. All right, we were able to get it out, so now we need to go up some so we can clear the lower component here. All right, and look at that. Right on out of there. So now we're gonna remove the other side the same way. The other side looks pretty similar to this. The only real difference is that it just has this point here for the rod connection. There's no motor, so it's gonna be lighter and easier, but it's still clamped in the same way. I'm gonna go ahead and show you where it's at, because on this particular trailer, it is in an unfortunate location, but it is still accessible. This one had a door on this side, but if we look at that side over there, no door. So you would think, okay, well maybe around the side here in this side compartment. Also not accessible in the side compartment. Middle compartment, maybe we can get to it here, not accessible here. This needs to stay enclosed to ensure that no exhaust fumes or anything enter the cab of the vehicle. So where you actually have to access that is in your storage compartment underneath. So get ready to lay down and crawl in. So we're now in that compartment that we told you about. This is the through cab compartment where you store stuff underneath your trailer. It goes all the way from side to side. There's a door on each side. There was a wall located right here, but it was only held in by 4 screws, 2 on this stud, 2 on the other stud over there. We were able to pull that whole wall off, set it aside, and actually get access to this thing. So to remove that, it is a different bolt on this one, and it's probably because this is what I usually see on these bars. It's an Allen up here, 3/16 in size, still 7/16 for the nut that's on the other side, but I bet you the bolt that we removed earlier likely was an Allen, had sheared, and they replaced it. So now we'll get up in here and take this side off. 3/16 Allen in there. And yeah, it should be pretty free rotating if your jacks aren't touching the ground. So if you need to move it around a little to get it to line up with your wrench and stuff, you should be able to, since we have the other side already out. All right. It's a little difficult because of the compartment. We're pretty confined in here. But we're gonna grab the rod before we pull the bolt all the way out so it doesn't fall or anything. We don't want to accidentally cause damage to something. And we'll slide that off of there. Again, it does collapse. So if you need to make it a little smaller to get it out, you can go ahead and get it out. We're gonna get it all the way out of here because of the limited space that we've got to work with in here. So now we're gonna take out the carriage bolts that are in the clamps. It's just like the other side. They did put the nut on the front side, so you're gonna have to kind of reach around if yours are like that. But it's still going to be the same size hardware, and we're going to remove them just like we did over there. and then we'll be able to slide our jack up and get it out of here. So here we have our new jack here. Inside the new jack, you'll find the drop leg there. The drop leg has a hole at the bottom. You can see it doesn't have one of those at the top. It's clean. That hole is for going into the foot plate. So here's our foot plate. Drop that down in there, line up the holes. Slide your pin in, flip it over on the other side. And then we're just gonna set this in place with the holes going left to right. Just kind of get it up underneath there, lined up underneath the square hole where you took out your old jack. So when we drop it down in there, we can kind of line it up in there. So now we'll get our new jack here. Now if we look at the new jack, you can see it's got these protrusions there. Those are gonna go in between the clamps. One of them, this one's gonna sit on top of the lip there, and then this one here is gonna be just on the bottom side of the lip there. You'll have this here, you can see it's on this side, and it's also on this side, and that's so you can mount the motor either facing towards the front or the back. The preferred method is to put the motor towards the back, but we have a cross brace there, so we're not gonna be able to. That's why they put the tabs on both sides. We'll put our motor forward, so that way it fits. So we're gonna get it up in there and lined up in between these two components here. And your new jack is gonna be pretty heavy, so just be careful when working it in there. All right, so we've got it roughly where we want it to be. We're gonna go down below real quick here. See what we need to do to line this up. Looks like we need to just tap it that way just a little bit. And now it's not uncommon that in order to get this to fit in there, you're gonna have to tap it in place. So we need to lift it up just a little bit with it to make sure it's gonna sit in the location it needs to sit, and then we'll tap it on in here. So we're not quite resting on it. We do gotta go up just a little bit. So we'll kind of tap it up or pry it up with a pry bar, whatever we need to do to get it to go up just a little bit. So I'm just feeling to make sure it's on the lip, and I can feel that it is resting on the lip there. We're gonna check the top. This one does need to go in just a smidge more before we're lined up under it, but we'll again just tap it in place there. So once we get it in there, we can go ahead and take our bolts now, slide them through, and it's not uncommon for this to again be pretty tight, so you might have to kind of push and tap as you're doing this to get it to line up. Or if the tapping doesn't want to do it, you could also use your pry bar, and you can push inward with your pry bar some, and we're really close there. Sometimes even you can double with your hammer here. And when you're gonna, sometimes you might need a metal hammer for the striking the head of these bolts to get them to drive in. There we go. Make sure that it does go all the way in. We can see the square from the carriage bolt is lined up in the square hole. Now when you're hitting your jack, you want to make sure you're using a rubber dead blow on the jack. We don't want to dent that because it could potentially interfere with its operation. But for the bolt, it's fine to go to a metal hammer for just striking the head. Once you get that on there, we'll take the locking nuts that come in the kit, put that on there. And for now, we're just going to snug it down so it can't move. We'll use a 9/16 socket to do so. There we go. And we're probably going to be tightening it further than that, but we're going to get the top bolt in before we do that. In the end though, when we get our bolt tightened down all the way, we want to measure the distance between the plate here and the plate here on the inside. There needs to be less than 2.5 inches of distance there to ensure you've got it tightened down enough. So now we got the top one in there. We just kind of did the same thing as the bottom, kind of tapped, pried, however we needed. A pretty useful tool is actually one of these. If you've got something with a little tapered end, you can kind of put it in the holes and use that to do a small pry motion too. That works pretty well. Now we'll snug this one down. And then we're gonna now switch to our ratchet, because I know that the powered tool just doesn't quite get it all the way there. We'll put a little bit more on it, and then we'll grab our tape measure and measure what the distance is. So now we're measuring the distance here, and we're right at just over 2 1/4, so we're under our 2 1/2 mark. We're probably about 2 3/8 up there. And then when we check down here, we are right at about 2 1/2, so I'll probably put a couple of more turns on it just to make sure we get under that 2 1/2 mark. So we can now install our release pins here. This is just like the old style that he had. It'll install into this portion, not this portion. I mean, this pin is going to slide through this, but you need to make sure that it's clamped around the outer piece here. I guess you'd call this the middle piece. You got your black piece, middle piece, and drop leg. So the middle extension piece, that's the part that actually goes up and down when it's operated by the motor. So we're just going to push up slightly on our leg until the hole lines up. Just like that. Make sure your pin comes through the other side. And you'll have 2 long bolts. The square hole will hold the head because these are carriage bolts. Push both of those in there. Line up the other side of the bracket into your holes. And it looks like it's a pretty precise fit around these components. I don't think flipping it over is going to make much difference, but we're going to try it. So yeah, it's pretty tight. But we do have it in there just enough to be able to get a nut on one side, so we'll put a nut on one side. And for our other side here, we'll just give it a little minor tap. Make sure that our bolt is lined up when we go to tap it in though. So our bolt's lined up there, kind of holding it like that to make sure it stays lined up. Just tapping the corner just a little. Real light taps, nothing too crazy. And we'll put that bolt on. And now we can go ahead and snug it down. You're going to use a 3/8 socket to snug it down. And I recommend kind of going back and forth, making sure you get it tightened down evenly. All right, that's good. Once you see it start to flex just a little bit right here, kind of a bow just a smidge, we want to stop. We don't want to damage it and bow it, way too far. So just an ever so slight bow, we know we're good. You can check the operation by pulling your pin, verifying the leg goes up and down smoothly. Looks like everything's working out there. And a little bit of grease in there can help it kind of smooth out its operation as well. So now we'll do the same thing over on the other side. So now we're going to mount up the control module. It's 2 pieces here. This is the module itself. It'll slide into the mounting plate. So we're just going to set the module in there for a moment. The mounting plate we're going to have to put inside of a cabinet. This component is not waterproof. It's not designed to be on an exterior. It is designed though to be up in the front, so that way you can raise and lower the trailer so you can line up for your kingpin and stuff like that. So you do want it in one of these front compartments. That way it's protected from the elements, but you can still access it while raising it and lowering it here at the front to be able to see that kingpin. So the mounting bracket here, we're going to put it here in this location. I made a little custom bracket just out of some scraps that we had. There's other places you could potentially put it. There's a support beam here, but I do want to let you guys know this support beam that's in there, there are propane lines that run through that, so just don't go running screws willy-nilly into that thing. So we're going to go ahead and take our component here. I am going to slide the connector for the module through it first, just because it's kind of hard to access with the bracket that I made. So just make sure we got the right end. That's the end that's going to plug in there. I believe they're probably the same on each side. Yeah, it's the same connector on each side, so it doesn't matter which end you grab. But we're going to feed it through the back here, just that way so we got it, just in case it does become difficult to plug it in. And now we're just going to line it up with our bracket and components here. And now we'll install the hardware. We are going to be using a number 2 square bit. That's the type of fastener that you get in your kit. These are the screws that it comes with. just run that in, and then we'll do the same thing over here. It does look like we probably would have been able to access it, but it was just unsure, so I wanted to have it in there just in case. All right, and then I put a little piece of wood in there so that way we're able to utilize the same fasteners, because you can see they're going to be behind the module, so they have to have a very small head that'll be countersunk in there, or else the module won't fit into this bracket. That feels pretty secure. Should be able to press the buttons with ease with this. It does have just a little bit of flex, but should be plenty fine for just the touch panel that it is. So now we're gonna bring our wires through. Normally you could plug this in from the back side, but again, the module or the mounting bracket that I made, it's probably gonna be harder to just plug it in through that opening. So we're gonna plug it in this way, and then we'll slide it down in there. If you look on the bottom of our module, it's got these hooks. You have to hook the bottom first, kind of push down, and then there's little tabs on 3 sides there that you just kind of push in and it'll click into place. So just make sure you do get those lined up so that way they hook. And then it should just push right in there. There it is. All right, we're back inside our compartment here. We're gonna mount up the main power distribution now. We're just about done here. We got this left and we've got the rear sensor. The front sensor is actually made into the unit here, and that's why it has a label saying front of vehicle with the arrow pointing that direction. If you see here, it also tells you to mount that side up, and that's the orientation this needs to be in for it to detect properly for its level sensing here for the front. You also want to put this as close to center as possible, so we went ahead and marked center here on the trailer. Now I do realize sometimes you got a center cross beam. If you need to slightly offset it a little bit, it should still function, but you'll get the best performance if you get it in the middle. I went ahead and marked each of the screw holes. There's 4 of them. I'm going to just take one of them to start here and just run it in. That way I can run that one down. It'll hold the module up there, and I'll use the module kind of as a template for the rest of them. All right, so we got that one started. We'll just pull it back out. And this is just so I can easily make sure I get it lined up properly. This one hole here will be just enough to hold the weight of the module for me. And then we can turn our module here so we line it up with the other marks we made. That way we know we're right there in the center. And that looks pretty good. And that's holding our module right there for us. So now we'll just run the remaining ones in. So now we're going to mount up our rear sensor. This is the plate you get. These 2 holes here are for mounting your sensor. They'll line up, and you do need to make sure you got your sensor facing the appropriate direction, front to rear, so you can put it on this bracket either way. It just depends on how you're going to mount it. Now these holes here were not in the bracket. I actually added those holes. I'm going to be using some self-tapping screws to mount it, so I just added the holes there for that. You don't get the hardware for this, and the thing we just mounted, the module, the distribution box that was inside, we also use self-tapping screws for that. Those also don't come in the kit. You don't get any hardware for these components. You got to provide your own. So I know that on ours we're going to be mounting it this direction towards the front like this, so I'm going to put it like that, front to rear. You can see it says this side up, so it's going to be sitting like this underneath the trailer. So we're just going to take our self-tapping screws and we're going to run some into the module here, into the sensor. Just starting them real quick. It's just plastic, so you can use any kind of screw really, as long as it's going to thread into it. The hole size is about 1/4 inch. Right there. So we got that in there. Now we'll go ahead and take these, and we're gonna use these larger self-tappers just to support the weight a little bit more, because this plate's actually pretty heavy. And you may consider spray painting it if you want to color match it. It's gonna be underneath though, so you're never gonna see it. So we're gonna crawl underneath there now, and we're gonna get this mounted up. So we're now here towards the back of our trailer. We've probably got another 5 feet before we are actually towards the full back of the trailer, maybe even a little more than that, maybe 6 feet. But the wiring isn't long enough to go any further than that, so that's why we're choosing this beam here, because the wires kind of held them out lengthwise from where the power distribution boxes that we mounted at the center of the front. You have to run a wire all the way from there down and to back here, and this trailer is just so long, it ain't gonna go all the way to the rear. Ideally, you wanna go as far rear as possible, so that's kind of where this point is for us, for our wiring to be long enough. So we marked center on the beam. I went ahead and held up my module, and we marked on each side where our mounting holes are. They may not look like the mounting holes are the equal distance from center, and that's because when I drilled these holes to mount it, I didn't really measure the holes. I just kind of picked 2 spots that were roughly in the spot I wanted them to be, because they don't need to be matched up. As long as the module's in center, that's all that matters. And again, it does need to face up, so that's the center mark there for our bracket. So that'll line up there just like that. And we're gonna do just like we did up front. I'm gonna run 1 screw in and then run it back out. And that'll make it easy for me to just stick the module up there, and then we can use the other hole as a template to make sure we get it in the right spot. So we're just gonna pick this one and run it in. Grab our sensor, slide our fastener through, line it up. And just run it down. You might want to leave it just a smidge loose so you can kind of angle it until it's facing forward to your liking. And we'll just finish it up there. And now we'll use it as a template here for our other screw. All right, so that's the last component that we need to mount up. At this point, we're going to take all the wiring harnesses in our kit and we're going to route them from the main module that we mounted in the front to each of the individual components that we've now installed. It's pretty easy to do that. Each end has a shape of connector, and all the harnesses are labeled. They'll say like left front jack, right front jack, and they're labeled on both sides. So you'll have a label on the side where you're going to plug it into the component, and you'll have a label up at the front to plug it into the module. So you almost can't get it wrong. All right, so here we are again. We went ahead and ran all the wires. You can see here they all are, and you can see that they are all labeled. Like this one says LR, and at the other end of this harness, it's going to have that same indicator indicating left rear, so you know exactly what jack to plug it in. Now, I do recommend that you just kind of look at your box and at your jack, because the connector ends on the box here are going to have 2 different types of connectors than what's in the back. The jacks are going to have a triangular shaped one and a rectangle shaped one. The module side is going to have 2 rectangular shaped ones. So just pay attention to that. Otherwise, they just simply plug in, and it's also labeled here on the box. If we kind of pull those out of the way, you can see it says left rear right there, left mid, left front. So again, you can't really get any of that wrong. The only part that it does get a little bit tricky, where I didn't really see too much of a labeling, was for the rear sensor and for the touchpad. Now, the rear sensor and the touchpad do have their own dedicated slots. They're located right here. The rear sensor is going to use the 3-pin connector into the 3-pin slot that's located right here at the corner. It's in this little cutout area. And then the module for the touchpad for our controls are going to plug in right next to that right here. Those are the only 2 spots that I really didn't see a label, but the connectors are only going to fit in those slots, so you can't really get that too much wrong. The sensor does have a triangle end connector on the sensor side, and it's a rectangle connector on the module side. The touchpad is the same connector on either end, so it doesn't matter on that one. Now, once you get all these plugged in here and also plugged in at your jacks, you'll need to wire it into power, and you'll get 2 short leads that come out of the module. We took those short leads and we first went directly to a circuit breaker. This is a 50 amp circuit breaker. That's what's recommended by the manufacturer to use. It doesn't come in your kit, so you will have to provide your own circuit breaker. The red wire, we simply went to the silver post of our circuit breaker because it's labeled load, and then the bronze post, which is labeled battery, we went and ran to the positive side of our battery. The black wire that you see here, we took the black wire from the battery harness that comes in our kit. It had a ring terminal on it just like this one. We just cut the ring terminal off because we just attached the black wire directly to the black wire using a butt connector. On the other ends of our wires here, we ran to the battery. This goes to the negative side for our black wire. You will have to put your own ring terminal end on it. They're just kind of blunt cut on the other side. So we did have to put on a slightly larger ring terminal because it does come with the ring terminals that you saw up there, but they're very small because they're designed to go on the circuit breaker side. On your battery side, you have a larger post, so you're going to need a bigger ring terminal. We're using 5/16 inner diameter ring terminals. And you can get those here at eTrailer. So we just simply stripped it back, crimped it on, and we made our connection here. And then we did the same thing for our positive wire going to the positive post of our battery. Our customer here has a 6-volt series setup, so it's a 6-volt battery. His other 6-volt battery is right up there. So you do need to make sure if you're using a 6-volt setup like this that the negative goes to one battery. Then you'll see the positive of this battery, it goes to the negative of the other battery, and then the positive of the other battery goes to the trailer. So you hook to the positive of that other battery that's going to the rest of the trailer, and the negative of this battery, you can see where all the grounds for the trailer are connected to. And then down each side of our trailer, we went through the opening that goes into our propane tank compartment. We went down the propane tank, down the side, and then we used clamps to secure it to the frame all the way down. These clamps we were able to purchase at a local hardware store, and we use self-tapping screws, which again don't come in the kit. You can get self-tapping screws at your local hardware store. And just make sure you get your wires run all the way down the frame to your jacks, and once you reach your jack, make sure you plug in your appropriate connector. We'll go ahead and show you those connector ends while we're right here. So here you can see this is the rectangle one on the jack, and that's the triangle shaped one, and they just simply plug in. So again, you can't really get them wrong. You can see the labeling is on this side as well. I'd use a few cable ties along the way, but just make sure that when you get back here near your wheels and stuff that you are gonna clear your tires and you're not gonna hit any moving components, and you'll go to both your jacks as well as your rear sensor. For the other side, we did the exact same thing, just going to the jacks that are located on that side. And then I went ahead and took the sticker that comes in our kit that has all the instructions for how to operate it. We went ahead and put it on the door for the compartment that has our control panel. So that way we've got quick notes right here to allow us to operate it. So we're gonna go ahead and turn our system on, make sure everything looks good. And the first thing it's gonna want you to do is your 0-point calibration. So we simply just wanna hit enter. And it's gonna be doing its check right now. So we're gonna let the system kind of do its thing. All right, and we can see now that it's finished its 0-point calibration on the display. It shows ready, gives us our battery voltage output so we know what that's gonna be. We're gonna go ahead and hit our auto level button. Now, it's normal for you to get a jack fault issue, and this is because the system needs to see some travel first, so it's very normal to see this. You would want to extend each jack about 6 inches and then retract them to get rid of this condition. So to clear this code, I've hit my up and down arrows until I get to the manual level. We're gonna hit enter. And now we're going to lower down the jacks. Each jack has to be down at least 6 inches because you need to retract the jacks a minimum of 6 inches to clear out this code. It helps it learn its position for each of the jacks. We extended the front and the rear jack 6 inches. Then we went back from our manual mode back to just the regular mode and hit auto level. It's now going to ground all the jacks, so that way it can bring down our middle jacks, so that way we can home those as well. All right, all of our jacks have now contacted the ground. It says ready. At this point, your system is basically done, because when you hit the auto retract to bring all your jacks up, which is auto retract right there, once you do that, as it retracts all those jacks, it's going to learn its home position, and you're not going to have that error message that you had when you first turned it on. So we can go ahead and retract them. We do still have our jack stands under here yet because we haven't hooked up to the truck or anything. So we want to make sure our nose isn't going to come down on our heads while we're working. So we're going to go ahead and hit enter to retract them all, and that should finish its all of its calibration that it needs to do for itself, and it'll just be ready to rock after that. All right, so our system here, it's doing its auto retract. At this point, your installation is basically complete. Just go through all your wiring and stuff, make sure everything is nice and secure, and then you're all good to go. Reinstall any panels that you removed or anything like that, and you're set. There are a few other features it has here. We don't have the customer's truck to set it up for those, but you can set up some custom parameters, so that way when you do you can set a 0 point in there, so that way when you're ready to leave from your campsite, you can just tell it to go to the 0 point, and it will bring the nose down to the same level each time, so that way you just back your truck up and your kingpin's right at the proper level. So yeah, you can take care of that as well. We're not going to be doing that today because we don't have the customer's truck. And after we did our auto level procedure, just out of curiosity, I grabbed one of our small levelers. We sat it on top of the battery right here. Wouldn't expect it to be level in the kind of a surface like this, but it is pretty close to being perfectly level. An additional benefit to not just leveling out your system automatically for you, with the 6 points of contact, this thing is extremely solid. I mean, I don't feel any movement in this thing, nothing. And after you've auto leveled your system, it'll do the front and the rear, and it's of course going to make sure that it has these middle jacks down and touching, because their main purpose is for stabilization. And that completes our installation of Lippert's Ground Control 3 6-point leveling system on our 2015 Forest River Vengeance toy hauler.